Welcome to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How we consume it and how it informs our everyday culture.
I'm Christian Sager, a writer and a designer.
And I'm Charlie Bennett, a librarian and a radio raconteur.
Each episode is us trying to understand the entertainment world that we all live in.
Just a little bit better. Today's episode is about the graphic novel Fluorescent Black. After being serialized in Heavy Metal magazine, this dystopian biopunk comic was published as a beautiful book in 2010, and hardly anyone is talking about it now. We discuss the creator's intentions and hopes for the story, along with Heavy Metal magazine's history and Christian's youthful memories of Singapore.
You can find our show notes at patreon.com/supercontext, or you can send us an email at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com. Are you as worried as we are that this horrific future is coming close to resembling our real-life society in 2025? Or is this just gross art?
Chris, you mentioned quite a lot, appropriately, that you spent some time in Singapore as a young person. And I've never really given that practical thought. I mean, I think about it in terms of, oh yeah, he lived out of the country. He was there at the behest of his father. It was probably very different. It gave him a different kind of youth.
Mm-hmm.
But I've not really delved into your Singaporean time. And I was reminded once again that I haven't really talked to you about it when you brought today's media artifact to us.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who were expats and lived in other countries, but I also, I'm still close with my best friend from growing up in Singapore. And I think we would both agree, like Singapore has or it did in the 90s, had a very unique, unusual culture for Southeast Asia. And it's something that's really stuck with me, both like sort of in the general, like being an expat makes you have a different perspective on the world, gives you maybe a little bit more maturity at a younger age. But it's rare to see something that's in Singapore. In fact, the only other thing I think that I've heard of that is set in Singapore is that movie Crazy Rich Asians.
Oh gosh, right.
I haven't seen it. Have you?
Yes. And very recently, in between the time that I read this and this recording, the season finale of Hacks
Really?
has a Singaporean detour.
Yeah. Singapore is kind of fascinating because it's a island nation.
Mm-hmm.
It's, a part of Southeast Asia, but it's also separate from it. It's a British colony, so the primary language is English, but it's also a melting pot, and that there's like a lot of different cultures that are all there, and they have their own religions, their own culture, language, all of those things. In a way that, like, in America, we like to pat ourselves in the back and say, like, oh, we're a melting pot. But, like, not like this. Like, it's pretty intense how many different types of lifestyles are living right on top of each other. But it is also, or at least it was when I was growing up, like, bordering on a dictatorship. And now, now that we are bordering on a dictatorship, it's starting to feel vaguely familiar to my childhood there.
So what was your general sense of the dictatorship as a kid?
Yeah. Well, there were two major incidents that happened while I was living there that are the incidents that are used for Westerners to sort of understand how different the government's reach is in Singapore. The first is bubblegum was made illegal while I was living there. And the reason why was because somebody stuck bubblegum to the inside of one of the subway system doors. And when one of them wouldn't open, the rest of them wouldn't open because that's how their train was set up for some reason. So people were stuck on the train. And rather than fix the problem with the train, the government was like, well, it's the gum that's the problem, and they outlawed the bubble gum. Um,
I fully support the Singaporean ban on chewing gum. Every
unpack
time I've
that.
ever stepped in gum on a
Oh,
sidewalk or felt it on my fingers under a table, I've
yeah.
just been like, this fucking bullshit.
The other one, it made national news over here in the States, which is that my classmate, Michael Fay, was arrested and charged with crimes that, I think it's debatable that he committed and then was beaten with a cane. And it was an international incident where Bill Clinton got involved and like pleaded with the Singaporean government on his behalf, asking them not to do it, and they did it anyways. There's a lot more to that story that than the 30 seconds that I just gave it, but that was intense to go through. And I wasn't one of the people who was arrested, and I certainly wasn't physically abused by the government, but like the police raided our high school and
Mm.
like took five of our classmates. Um, and it's funny, like didn't realize until recently how much that impacted me, how much that like stuck in my head and like informed who I am as an adult.
Can I ask you what's happened recently to make you think about that?
Good question. And like yes, that's part of why that's made me think about that, the current circumstances. So Charlie and I are recording this.
Yeah, we need to place ourselves in time
Yeah, so it's
now.
June 9th, 2025 as we're recording this. And as we're recording this, LA is, engaged in protest conflict, I guess, for lack of a better term, with a combination of the LAPD, ICE, and now the National Guard. And we are watching this with sheer terror. Like, as of today, footage was released of an Australian reporter covering what was going on, and an LAPD officer just straight up point blank shoots her in the back of the leg with a rubber bullet on camera. So yes, that's what I mean when I say like this kind of dictatorship, for lack of a better term, yeah, it's familiar to me.
Were you afraid generally in Singapore?
No, I wasn't. Um, and I think because like I wasn't doing any of the things that I could get in trouble. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are things that I did that probably would have constituted as bad of a crime as what Michael Fay did. Like, um, and to clarify, my understanding of those events is that he maybe vandalized a few things, but that the Singaporean government charged him with like vandalizing like 60 or 70 objects that they had in their back inventory. You know, I did stupid shit when I was a kid. Yeah, like lighting stuff on fire and throwing it at walls and whatever, just dumb. Vandalism isn't even the right term, just dumb shit.
Yeah.
But I wasn't scared until that happened. No.
Okay. Tell me more about why we read Fluorescent Black, the graphic novel from 2010-ish.
Yeah. So, um, I first read this book when the collected edition came out and not knowing that it was set in Singapore. And it really just blew me away because one, like I said, you don't normally see Singapore as a setting for something. It is a perfect setting for a kind of like sci-fi cyberpunk type thing like this is. But also the writer from my understanding from the research, the writer has not been to Singapore, but he tried to capture the language and culture differences that were there. And that was also really unique, especially at the time that this came out. He wrote the dialogue in what's called Singlish, which is like sort of the slang of Singaporeans. It's English, but with like a mixture of, it's kind of like if you remember Firefly, like how they would mix like Chinese words with English words and things like
Hmm.
that. Like it's a little bit like that. So yeah, it just really surprised me to see this familiar setting and culture. Also, this really stood out to me because when it came out was right like I'd been maybe making comics for 2 or 3 years at that point, and this book did a lot of things that I wanted to do with my own work, and I wasn't seeing done in other spaces. So it hit like a sweet spot. It was an independent book. It was transgressive. It inspired me to do more work that was like that. And at the time, being naive, I saw it as like, oh, this is a model of success. Like these guys did it. They told the story that they wanted to tell.
And the object exists and you're reading it and it's
Yeah.
a big deal.
Yeah.
Oversized comics always feel like they are a little more successful. It feels like,
Yeah.
oh, we've gone out of our way to make this one. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to clarify that though. So this is oversized in the sense that it is the collected edition is what's referred to as like the European
Hmm.
album
Yeah.
style, which for those of you that read Corridor, the magazine that I edited, we did the same format for that magazine. Heavy metal is in a bigger format in general, anyways, so it kind of lends itself to that. Yeah, it feels more tangible in your hands. Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about the collected graphic novel Fluorescent Black, written by M.F. Wilson, drawn by Nathan Fox. We'll get to the letterer and the colorist a little bit farther into the show. I'm going to try and explain to you what this thing is that you know better than me. This is
Sure.
a
Go
science
for it.
fiction comic. It was published in 3 parts in 2008 and 2010. I'm not quite sure if it was parts one and two and then three, or part one and then two and three.
Well,
Uh,
it was in Heavy Metal magazine, so
yeah.
like Heavy Metal is an anthology comic.
So it was serialized in pieces, but also Wilson, the writer, was very specific about how they thought they were going to do like 2 blocks, 2 parts. But
Yeah.
when it ended up being 3 parts, they had more time to like refine and think about how the story was going. The setting is Singapore in 2085 and the nearby Malaysian peninsula, because there's also, there's out of Singapore action. The plot is a heist. A gang of people who are genetically inferior by the terms of the world that's being built in the comic are hired to commit a bioterrorist attack on a genetics company. As with all heist stories, it's not what it seems to be. They're put in danger. They find out that they're actually getting something else, and all hell breaks loose. The other thing that they are getting that they don't know is a genetically modified clone person identity,
Yeah.
altered consciousness, singularity, creating mind. I don't quite get it, and that was totally fine. Uh, it's a kind of lunatic book, and
Yeah.
and it's written like a lunatic book. Also, it's got everything's kind of shaky and like the lines are all over the place, and shapes deform in the frames. It's a very loose and gross book in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think part of that is Nathan Fox's style. Like if you read other Nathan Fox comics, that's inherent to his artwork, but also as we'll see in the research, it was intentional that like this sort of frenetic style to things was on purpose because yeah, they wanted this future to be gross, that it was like this body horror nationalism in a way.
And I should say, there wasn't a lot out in the world to guide us in this conversation.
No, there wasn't. And, I think we did not get any numbers. So we know that. We might have been able to find, I didn't think about this. We might have been able to find how many issues those heavy metal, like original comics sold, but I don't think there's any numbers on the Fluorescent Black collected edition.
Hmm.
I don't think it's very many. I almost never see this in stores.
And
And
it's out of print. And
yeah.
I have to admit, though, after borrowing it from the library, I'm kind of like, I'll spend some money on getting this. I mean, again, I really like those European-sized graphic novels, especially when they're hardcover.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Stray Bullets, those first three volumes of Stray Bullets that I love so much, partly because of their size. Um,
But I do want to put a pin in that. Like this is what we're about to describe to you. I'm imagining that most of our listeners have not seen or read this. But it is really high quality.
mhm.
And it's strange to me that given all the research that we pulled on this and the purpose behind it and everything, that it's fallen out of print, that it's this sort of difficult to find artifact. Um, and yeah, just that like it didn't make a splash.
There's a number of very excited reviews that we found that when something is pumped up and then bottoms out, usually the reviews don't then sort of show excitement. It's like the press releases show excitement, the
Yeah.
interviews beforehand show excitement, but then it just kind of goes bloop.
But
This
we
is the
should
opposite.
also, yeah, I think that's true. But we should also point out pulling research for this was way more difficult than most of our projects. It was hard to find legitimate
Yeah.
reviews or sources, and there was one big interview that thank God you found
Yeah.
because a lot of the information came from there.
And I should warn you, I threw a final article into the script right before we started, just to
Oh, cool.
surprise you.
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, let's go to the press release. That was really all I was getting ready to say was we didn't find a lot of research, so we're going to the propaganda.
Sure.
Kevin Eastman. I did not know that part of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle team was also editor-in-chief of Heavy Metal magazine at one point. Kevin Eastman says, "We are very excited to be publishing Fluorescent Black. This book is like nothing else out there. It's crazy, original, and totally punk."
I can't help but hear that in the voice of Michelangelo from the cartoon. It's crazy, original, and totally punk, dude. Cowabunga.
So if we go into the press release, here are the things that it highlights. It says hard hitting dark future, Southeast Asia, gene tech, utopian and dystopian futures in near proximity. The story plays with other hot button themes like public health care, gene patenting, eugenics, the dangers of bioartistry, and the limits of body modification. Known for its provocative ideas and scientific accuracy, Fluorescent Black has been praised by biotechnology web rings and counterculture magazines as a seminal biopunk novel, a relatively new genre which has been slowly working its way into the literary and cinematic marketplace.
I
I
want
would like
to,
to say something.
yeah, go ahead. We're probably about to say the same thing.
I did not find any biotechnology web rings or counterculture magazines describing Fluorescent Black as a seminal biopunk novel.
Yep, that was exactly what I was about to say. And in case you're new to Super Context, Charlie is an academic librarian, so it is his job to be able to find things like that.
Chris, no. Radio Raconteur.
That's your side gig.
Side hustle. Oh,
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Okay. The writer, M.F. Wilson, is Matthew Francis Wilson, born and raised in Los Angeles. That leads us very quickly to the fact that this was a movie script first,
Yeah.
that then became a graphic novel. Uh, he does a lot. At the time that this came out, he'd done a lot and he continues to do a lot. Writer, director, graphic novelist, development at a studio, writing short films, and producing a variety of movies, none of which have a very high profile, but connect with some counterculture figures.
Well, he worked for, I don't know how to pronounce it, if it's Imagi or Imagi, but it's a studio that specifically worked on animated adaptations of comics like Astro Boy and Ultraman. But then you can find online like his portfolio of his short movies, which include, yeah, The Final Moments of Carl Brandt, which has Paul Rubens in it, Lullaby with Tobin Bell, and then this documentary. I don't think this was on the portfolio. No Room for Rock Stars.
He directed second unit on that documentary.
Oh, okay, okay. And then I found his LinkedIn profile, which is not something I think that alone goes to show you like most of the creators we find on we talk about on the show like don't have LinkedIn profiles, but like he is currently working, according to his LinkedIn profile, as a writer, producer, and narrative designer for something called the Sophiaverse, which is a sentience AI lab, an AI-driven metaverse and multiplayer gaming experience that features Sophia, the world's most famous robot. And then I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but according to his LinkedIn, he designed essentially the story and I think like the dialogue and the branch narrative stuff within this AI MMO.
Yeah, you're sounding a little bit confused. I know you're not actually confused. You're just not sure that this is something that you would like, right?
No, I think I am. Well, it's both things. It's definitely not something I think I would like, and I love RPGs, but I don't understand where the AI comes in. Maybe it's that I think from what he's written here, the NPCs have AI behind them, so they're not just responding with pre-written scripts. They're
Right.
responding based on prompts that he's presumably entered.
My very limited understanding of how AI works is almost all metaphorical. And you have to think about thousands of little robots that are all responsible for a single decision.
Right. Hmm.
And so you have to essentially program those decisions and give the options for those decisions. So when he says on his LinkedIn, uh, he wrote branching narrative stories, that he did writing formats for AI tools, that he designed complex prompts and wrote scripts. This is, oh, and personality graphs and choice trees. Like
Yeah.
he provided a flexible AI universe gaming experience with material to be rich in its response.
Yeah, and I think it's been 5 years since we've done this show, and in the last 5 years, AI has really had an explosion for better or for worse. But I think like maybe you've previously referred to the stank on my voice in certain things, and
I have, because it's
yeah,
often there.
it is. Yeah, it's I am a snobby little shit, but I have complicated feelings about AI, and I think you do too. And I'll be honest, like I don't know where to draw the line with my values on AI. So I am often, and I think that it's constantly evolving too. So I'm often presented with like, okay, how do I feel about this? So I'll be honest, like for the research for this episode, I used ChatGPT today, not
Really?
to pull dialogue, but to quickly ask it to pull together some examples for me that you and I could talk about later in the episode.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm clearly okay with that. Am I okay with AI personality graphs and choice trees in video games? I think so. I'm not sure.
You don't have any information, do you? You just have a feeling.
I am wary of AI,
Yeah.
which is, for a number of reasons. One, climate change related, and two, how much of it is taking from other people's original creative work.
Well, I'll tell you something. Just like an NPC, I am casual now about AI because you started as suspicious. If you
Yeah.
had been pro AI, I would have
Oh.
immediately gone to, come on, man, you got to shake that off.
Yeah, so
I,
you're just doing devil's
I am
advocate here.
utterly, no, I'm not doing devil's advocate. I am utterly conflicted about AI and
Yeah.
my understanding of it and how my values are applied to it. So I guess I'm saying I'm with you in all your suspicion, but also get off this guy's dick.
Yes, and recently, I actually posted this on Blue Sky. Recently, I read a newsletter where some folks who work in the tech space were trying to unpack this, what you and I are talking about, and they were essentially like, yes, there's all these problems, and they just listed like, a dozen issues with the AI as a space and its relationship with capitalism, et cetera. But also, it's not going anywhere. Like Pandora's box is open, the cat's out of the bag, whatever metaphor you want to go with here. It's not going anywhere. And whether you use it or not, I think is an individual decision. But I also think like it's worth understanding how it works within the
Yeah.
context of our society if you're going to make value judgments about it.
And the piece we can take from this for the writer of Fluorescent Black is that he did write a script and or a screenplay and then a script for a comic, but he also worked in other film related areas. And right now he's deep in narrative and storytelling and world building for a gaming experience. So
Yeah.
he's not all over the place, but he has had a flowing professional identity over the past 15 years.
Yeah, he's a multimedia creator, I
There we
think.
go.
Yeah. And now the art for this, as we previously mentioned, or the illustrated art is by Nathan Fox. Fox is an artist, and he's done everything from work for Marvel and DC to his own creator-owned books like The Weatherman. I think the first book that I ever saw his work in was an adaptation of Pigeons from Hell, which is a Robert E. Howard story, creator of Conan the Barbarian and Solomon Kane, but this is like a horror story. I was thinking it was a Joe Lansdale story. It's because the comic adaptation is written by Joe Lansdale.
Ah, okay.
Fox is not just like a comics creator. He's also, I don't know if academic is the right word, but he's the chair and founder of the MFA Visual Narrative Program. And he also works at the Rizzo Lab at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. You have probably seen his work even if you don't read comics because he does a lot of commercial illustration for major magazines like the New York Times, Esquire, GQ, Wired, Rolling Stone, etc.
I love this thing that his bio says. He lives and works in Wisconsin and commutes to teach in New York City.
Yeah, that sounds wild. I don't,
It's a
yeah.
very interesting life. I wonder if that's true also.
I'm sure it's true. I guess what does commute to New York City mean? I don't think every morning he gets up and takes a flight to New York City and then goes home and, you
Oh,
know,
dude, that's totally another comic book. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, colors on this book were done by Jeremy Cox. There's not a lot about Cox in here other than what Nathan Fox says about him. But he started out doing comics in 1992. He self-published his own romantic horror comic, which was called Zombie Love. And he's worked on thousands of comics for pretty much every publisher. One I really wanted to call attention to here, though, is he did the colors for Alan Moore and J.H. William III's Promethea, which is like widely regarded as one of the most beautiful comics ever created. And he's been nominated for multiple Eisners. So this is, a colorist at the top of his game.
Okay, so let's talk about how this came to be. Um, we found a report in Variety about what was happening at the beginning of the creative process. So it's kind of fun. This is more of an autopsy than sometimes the show is because we had to find clues. We had to,
Yeah.
circumstantial evidence.
It was a locked
Uh,
room mystery.
so way back in 2007, Variety started reporting on this project. But the way they reported on this project was that it was a script by science fiction writer and maker of film shorts, Matt Wilson, not M.F. Wilson, but Matt Wilson, to be adapted as a graphic novel first, illustrated by Nathan Fox with text by Wilson. Such an interesting way to report on a planned comic.
Yeah, so I guess like if we're looking at the timeline here, Variety reported on this before the first installment of the comic was published. So presumably Wilson had already written the screenplay, had rewritten it in comics format, and Fox was working on the art as this article was released.
And they reported that it would be finished in 2008, featured in July on Heavy Metal Magazine's cover. And Imagi didn't really survive this
No,
process.
no.
Now Imagi produced one of the many Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies in 2007. This was a fully animated one, and it did not last uh, much longer after that. It went bankrupt in 2010, probably because the movie Astro Boy completely tanked.
Apparently, yeah. It's funny. All of the things that this company produced are like adjacent to my interests and things like in theory I would watch if they were on, but I've never seen any of them. I haven't seen this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I haven't seen this Astro Boy. I don't think I've seen any of the movies that they produced.
And then there's this little twist. Uh, I don't want to make any judgments on this, but Variety reports that Amaji Animation Studios acquired the rights to the screenplay. Wilson worked there.
Yeah, so according to his LinkedIn, he was an employee there for 3 years. So this press release makes it sound like he's this freelance screenwriting agent who they happen to buy his screenplay, but it sounds more like that he was probably an employee there and that developed this as an employee. It's unclear.
Yeah, he retained the rights enough that he could, you know,
Yeah,
publish it
yeah.
as a comic, and it went to Heavy Metal magazine.
Or
So
look, maybe he was an employee and he did write it on the side, and that was, how he got his foot in the door.
yeah, I'd be interested in that story.
Hmm.
Um, but what we need to take from this is that this was not a comic book writer who wrote a comic. This was a multimedia storyteller who kind of explored his ideas in a couple different ways.
Let's unpack this for a second here because this is important, especially like for comics nerds who are listening right now. Like, a big bone of contention in the comics community, one way or the other, is that because of the boom, which started around 2008, of comics adaptations in television and film, that a lot of comic books, especially independent creator-owned ones, are written in mind with them being eventually adapted into another form of media. And some people have strong feelings about that. They especially have strong feelings about folks from other industries coming in and doing a comic and then jumping out of the industry again. Um, and I don't know that that's what Wilson did here at all. That's not what I'm saying. But there is somewhat of a like stigma about like somebody turning a screenplay into a comic.
And does that go the other way? Like, do people, when they read a comic that feels like a movie being drawn, is there a little bit of, oh, you're just trying to get bought?
I see a lot of people complain about that. Yeah. I mean, a lot of my friends, though, are comic book creators, but like, yes, people do complain about that because, like, sometimes folks will purposely limit what they put into the story because they know that it wouldn't get picked up because the effects budget would be too much.
Got you. Okay. That's a nice segue to some more from the press release about Fluorescent Black. Wilson said, I wanted to write this story for all the things it is guilty of. It's hardcore, violent, sexual, and frightening. It's venereal horror, biopunk, and psychedelic science fiction all rolled into one.
So that is a very well written press release quote. Like that's perfect, right? It's got all these like buzzwords in order to try to catch somebody's attention. I think what he's saying is true though. Like,
Yeah, that's an accurate description of the comic that I read.
yeah, I mean, so like, no spoilers, but like I'd say within the first 5 pages, we're introduced to this community in Malaysia where like people just casually murder each other and sell their organs. And there's just piles of dead bodies everywhere. It's very gory.
Yep. And then there's also telepathic connections and Philip K. Dick style superimposed memories.
Yeah,
There's body modification. There is a lot of tits and ass.
lots. And we'll talk more about that later too.
Yeah, real heavy metal stuff. It was a little creepy to read it, especially the
Yeah.
drawing style having that kind of fungus look to it. And meaning
Mhm.
the lines were not distinct. It looked like some of the stuff had just kind of grown into the shape that it was.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good description. I think I have a question for you. So
Yes.
for this show, I have asked you to read a number of pretty extreme comics, some
Yeah.
things that you were a little bit embarrassed about, like Providence. How did you feel about this? Did this put you off or were you
Oh no, I wasn't put off at
engaged
all.
by it?
Yeah, I was into it and I experienced it a lot like a movie, like a wild ride, and I enjoyed that. I did notice like, oh, here's this new development in my adulthood. I was kind of turned off by all of the upskirt shots and the
Yeah.
and the random nipples. It's like, I kind of wish this did not have that in there. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that's because I would prefer to separate, erotica from my comic book reading, or if it just felt a little bit too
Gratuitous.
much like my youth.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later when we get to representation because I have thoughts about this. But yeah, let's keep going with the production of this book. So, Wilson explains that the way that the comic came about was that he cold called Nathan Fox after seeing some of his work in Rolling Stone. And he said, quote, I felt he had a gritty style I was looking for, so I started tracking him down. Um, he goes through and talks about this. One thing that I don't know is explicitly mentioned here, and again, maybe I'm connecting the dots where they don't exist, but this was published by Heavy Metal Magazine. M.F. Wilson worked for a company that put out a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. So I wonder if he developed some kind of a relationship with Kevin Eastman through that, and that is subsequently how Heavy Metal became the home for this.
So we can't be sure of any of that, but it is completely true that the editor in chief of Heavy Metal created IP that Wilson's company or the company that Wilson was working with produced as a film. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is a connection for sure. Whether it was, hey guys, hey, you want to do something with my magazine? Or if it was just he had his number and was able to
Right.
contact him, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, but
But
that again, like similar to some of the other things. Oh, wait, no, here it is. He said he does say Kevin Eastman was the first person we approached because we knew he would give us complete freedom, but he doesn't say how they approached.
yeah, and Wilson says that Nathan Fox was enticed by the script, but also the idea of doing it for heavy metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening who are like, I don't know what this heavy metal thing is, don't worry, we're going to cover that. Wilson unpacks, this sort of script to comic thing. He says Fluorescent Black began as a film script. It was very dense. There were so many things that had to be detailed for the reader to get an idea of the world I was seeing in my head because what I was imagining wasn't something common to readers. But because he was a filmmaker, he wanted to show that through images rather than words. I think what he's trying to say here is he didn't want there to be a lot of exposition
Yeah.
explaining this world.
And he was imagining a story image by image. And he said something very interesting about film versus comics. He says, I find the film medium is the most comprehensive medium of all. It has picture, sound, music, and acting rolled into one. It is very limited in other ways. Making a film is expensive and requires a lot of collaboration, meaning sometimes things get lost in the process. With the comic medium, there is more freedom to experiment and take artistic risks. If you tried to shoot some of the scenes in Fluorescent Black,
Hmm.
you would be, you could potentially get a Furiosa or Fury Road out of it.
Uh, hmm.
But you could also potentially do a horrible free jack.
That's a good pull. No, when I said it's not because I don't think that this is like the quality of Fury Road. It's something that I want to talk about later on. I think that this is so transgressive that it would be very difficult to get made for the budget that it would require. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
You,
Like
you mean
with
it
the
would be hard
level
to get
of
that money because it would take so much money to really make it come to life?
exactly. And then combining that with all the sex and violence and gore, it would be a tough sell, you know? I think unless like there was some other component attached to it. And well, here we are 15, 17 years later, and it hasn't been made into a movie yet.
Yeah,
Um,
spoiler,
yeah.
it hasn't become anything other than an original graphic novel.
And we should also mention Wilson admits in this interview too that not only had he tried developing the movie with various people in the film industry, he also wrote treatments for two more books slash movies, as this is a trilogy in his mind. Um, and even in the comic format, we haven't seen the second or third parts
Yeah.
of this in 17 years. So
He actually really dug into this idea. He said, I spent a lot
yeah.
of time developing the movie. I want it to remain weird. I've written treatments for two more books and movies, as you said. And he even says the first book is actually the second part. He wants
Oh,
to
okay.
prequel or, he
Okay,
wants to
so
go back in
there's a
time.
Phantom Menace out there somewhere.
And he wants to make a video game, or at the time, he wanted to make a video game out of it also. So
Yeah,
I think this connects to what he's doing now, building immersive gaming experiences. He wanted a world to play in, and he
yeah,
wanted to make all kinds of stuff out of it. I mean, there's assuredly a profit motive out of this. The more ways his idea flourishes in the world, the more markets it's in, the more possibility for people to pay for it. But also, he just felt like the idea was rich and overflowing.
yeah. And I think too, like, I want to be clear, I'm a fan of this book, and I would like to see more material set in this world, whether it's in comic format or prose, um, it's very rich,
Yeah.
it's a really well developed universe.
It's clearly hard to do, though. And we're
Hmm.
lucky that even this one book was made.
I agree. And, I keep hinting that I want to talk about this later, but I think part of that has to do with our times. I think since 2008, transgressive art in popular culture is less acceptable.
You know, that feels so subjective. Like, I feel like, yeah, that's probably true. But then there's a lot of transgressive art that we don't see.
We'll come back to this.
Okay. You already mentioned this Wilson quote about Eastman, but I'm going to read the whole thing. Kevin Eastman was the first person we approached because we knew he would give us complete freedom. That was the most important thing to us. The reason we chose to publish with heavy metal. We could put in all the nasty shit we love.
Hmm.
Kevin also agreed to do the book in the oversized format, which was a big thing for Nathan, whose artwork is very detailed and looks better blown up in a bigger size. And Nathan Fox, he co signs that. We wanted to keep the ultra violence and the sex in the story.
Yeah.
Survival in this world is not pretty, not something that could be softened. Heavy Metal was the only, capital letters, only publisher who would allow us to show that explicitly.
Hmm.
Times have changed because I don't think that that would be true now.
Um, hmm.
Not only because heavy metal doesn't quite exist anymore.
That's true, but also, no, I'm gonna disagree with you here. I think it would be pretty difficult to find a publisher who would take this on
What
now.
about Image? I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, Image might, and they have a relationship with Nathan Fox. That book, Weatherman, I mentioned earlier, they published, but as we've talked about on the show before, and things have, continued in the 5 years that we've been off the air, Image has put out things that are transgressive, say the Divided States of America, and have felt a lot of backlash for it too. So I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Like, this is going to become a theme for this episode, and I just keep hinting that we're going to talk about it later. But like, one of my complaints with the comics industry is I think that it's a lot more difficult to find transgressive material, especially through a publisher. It's self-published, that's one thing. But Vertigo in the 90s might have put something like this out. Um, but I can't other Image maybe, but I can't think of a lot of other publishers that would be willing to take on the controversy.
Okay. I mean, you have more experience in the
Eh,
various things that people publish. No, no, I'm not
No, but
blowing
I
you
could
off
also be
here.
wrong. I could see
Yeah.
our listeners disagreeing with. I have friends who disagree with
Oh,
me
you're
on
for
this.
sure wrong about something.
Yeah.
All right. Nathan Fox also said about the production process, collaborating with Jeremy, the colorist, is always amazing, and he was the first choice for the book, hands down. Once we started researching for the series and talking about color, the research and our own experimental color palettes just ended up syncing on the book and approach.
I think that's part of what you were talking about earlier too. Like they refer to it a few times in the notes here, but like the colors really add a lot to the kind of sickening, grotesque feel
Yeah,
of
there's
things.
there's browns and pinks and greens all together.
Hmm.
You know, flesh is not flesh colored, and the sky is not sky colored, and the vegetation sort of is the
Yeah.
wrong kind of color. It's wild, and it's called fluorescent black. But now, after reading the book, in my mind, fluorescent black is pink.
I think that's because of the cover, maybe,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean,
Hmm.
I'm not saying, oh, I think that it is pink. I'm just saying fluorescent black is now pink in my head,
Yeah,
if I
it's
don't think about
interesting.
it too much.
I don't think there's anywhere in the notes where they address the title, but I always assumed that that was like a way of describing the color that you see when a black light shines on top of something, but I don't know. I don't know what they mean with it.
I mean, I think it's a very psychedelic thing. It's a big part of the ending sort of I see into the world, I see into
Yes.
the sky kind of moment. Like, you know, fluorescent black is a contradiction, a paradox, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's pivot and talk a little bit about the setting. Wilson addresses the Singapore element and he says Singapore is a character in this book. In many cases, I would say it's the main character. I got lucky and happened upon it at a very early stage of the conceptualization process. I wanted to find a hot environment to set the story in, and I didn't want the rainy, dark world you see so much in sci-fi books and movies. I
That's
think
Blade Runner, right?
he's
That's really
referring to
what he's
Blade
saying.
Runner.
Yeah.
Yep. Specifically, he wanted something that was along the equator, and that's how he found Singapore. Fox says it was the perfect setting. Biopunk fits Singapore like a glove. They both did a lot of research, but Fox in particular tried to stay true to the city and the culture, and what would have existed at this point in time. There's a lot of talk about is it Biopolis or Biopolis? How would you say
I
that?
think Biopolis is probably the way to say it.
Yeah. So this is something that was created in Singapore after my time living there, so I'm not as familiar with it. Uh, yeah, that Singapore is a huge part of this book. They both felt like they were sort of armchair tourists because they weren't actually visiting in person. They were pulling stuff off of images and video online.
So, just from your kind of memory take, would that have
Yeah.
just been prohibitively expensive for them to go and take a bunch of pictures and do the research?
It's not cheap to fly to Singapore. Like, I think my friend and I looked into it recently just because we were like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go back after like 30 years, maybe like celebrate our anniversary of graduation or something. Although neither of us graduated there. But yeah, I think it's like $2,000 to fly from the East Coast of America to Singapore.
Okay. So, the Biopolis is a real thing. This was something that they both saw and felt like, ah, this is a cool real world thing happening now that we can extrapolate. And I found an article called Singapore Biopolis, Bare Life in the City State. It's by Catherine Waldby, published in East Asian Science, Technology, and Society in 2009.
And let's clarify that's Bear, Bare, not Bear. I don't want Jeff Vandermeer to get upset
Oh
about us
my
talking about
God.
bears again.
Have you brought up Jeff Vandermeer in every fucking episode that we've recorded since we
That
got back?
that's my goal, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy. In late 2003, the Singaporean government launched Biopolis, a life sciences technopole that brings key Singaporean biomedical research institutes together with global and local biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies and governance bodies. Oh my God. Reading academic texts, I just get so tired sometimes. The
You do
government,
it for a living.
I do it for a living. The government has allocated generous funding to a range of biomedical research at Biopolis and adjacent academic and clinical institutes. Its stated aim is to make Singapore the Biopolis of Asia, the premier life sciences hub in a region where several much more populous states, notably China, India, and South Korea, are rapidly scaling up public investment in regenerative medicine and genomics, which I guess
Okay.
is the economics of gene science, maybe.
I don't know.
Now,
Genomics.
yeah, here's the final thing I found, like the bit from the article that sums up the feeling that Biopolis must have brought out in Wilson and Fox. Its spatial organization is designed to both capture the mercurial effects of intensified interaction and inspire scientific musings on fundamental processes of life and matter, saturating the space with experimental energy. Biopolis, then, is a garden of innovative Eden.
So I agree with you 100% that this sounds like it inspired Fluorescent Black. I don't understand what you just read to me.
Well, let me try to explain it to you.
Okay.
They put a bunch of research institutes, classrooms, and office spaces next to each other and called it Biopolis. And they hoped that the scientists and the academics would have lunch together.
Thank you. That seems more accurate. Yeah. Yeah. This is
But
essentially an office park.
it does point out you have to take at face value what the propaganda idea was, because that's
Yeah.
real. They, wanted it to be seen as a premier life sciences hub. This is a place where you want to be. This is I want to say Xerox Park, but also I don't really know what goes on at Xerox Park. So uh, they wanted this to be a place where people would come and bring their money and their research and make Singapore look better.
And that lines up with my experience of living in Singapore. Yeah.
Is Singapore a nation city?
Yep.
That
Yeah.
like the
So
whole thing?
it's an island. The city takes up, I don't know, most of the island. There's parts of the island that aren't urban. Uh but it's all just one nation. It's
Yeah.
probably I'm this is a wild guess. Like geographically, it's probably smaller than New York City.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to Wilson, who says the first thing I did was flesh out the setting. Then the plot came later. So this is like the Mission Impossible movies now, right? They found the place where they wanted things to happen and they let the story come out of what was there.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just talking to somebody about this, but instead of the Mission Impossible movies, I used the Bourne movies. Like those films, and I think James Bond, like all the spy-fi stuff, like operates as like cheap tourism for Americans in a way. It's like, oh, I know what Budapest looks like now. I saw the 20-minute car chase that was in that Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah. Well, let's say that with a little less like cynicism, going other places through storytelling
Yeah.
is has a very rich history, especially in spy, heist, and crime films.
Yeah, and I think the difference here is these guys did the work and like genuinely tried to understand what made Singapore a unique setting that fit the story they were working on.
Yeah, Nathan Fox said that Wilson's script and screenplay had the actual locations and slums, uh, which assisted in setting the tone and their picture of what the world would look like. And then he and Jeremy really wanted to keep that acid saturated color we saw in the color palette when we researched Singapore. And what is Johor Bahru?
I believe that is the community that's just on the other side of the bridge that connects Singapore and Malaysia together. It's been a
Got you.
minute since I drove through there, but I think in the world of Fluorescent Black, Johor Bahru is where the what they refer to as like genetically inferior people are exiled to.
Yeah, and we should make this very explicit. In the book, the borderline of Singapore and Malaysia is also the borderline of rich and poor,
Yeah.
healthy and unhealthy, uh, strong and vulnerable, all the whole thing.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, part of me is like a little bit suspicious of the idea that the colors in fluorescent black matched up with Singapore. What was your
Oh,
take on that?
oh no, 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 no. I mean, Singapore is tropical for sure, but I wouldn't call it acid saturated color. And it definitely doesn't look like the colors that are in this book. Like, Um,
Well, we're seeing their artistic interpretation, their feelings coming out in the work. Okay, so
yeah,
I feel like it's important to say, even though they used a lot of photo reference and real parts of Singapore, like Biopolis and Asian architecture and all kinds of stuff, it is also a fantasy of the way
yeah.
it
I mean,
looks.
it takes place 80 years after when it was created, and my assumption was that those colors were used both for as a storytelling effect, but also like as I was reading it, I just assumed like in this world, along with all of this sort of genetic dystopian stuff, there was also some kind of pollution that made the
Yeah,
world
yeah.
look like this.
So does it line up with your memory of Singapore authoritarianism that Singapore in the story is bright and white and clean and run by a corporation that will murder its inhabitants if they get out of line, and that Malaysia is a libertarian paradise in the sense that you can kill people for the money you get from harvesting their organs.
I would say that that is an extreme extrapolation of what it's like when you get to the point of murder on either side, as you're
Well, yeah,
mentioning
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But yeah,
What I'm asking is,
Singapore is very clean
yeah,
and very cosmopolitan.
did
And
Malaysia have that bad reputation in
uh,
Singapore? Did they kind of say, oh, if you go across the bridge, it's trouble?
yeah, I mean, yes and no. We as both as tourists and as students, we would cross the bridge. Like I went to Malaysia many times for swim meets.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
So it
there you
wasn't
go.
like so dangerous that like we were like afraid to do it. Singaporeans, I think, probably do have some kind of a classism between the two
Yeah.
spots.
There's a lot of urban and rural neurosis in the way that
Mm.
the world of fluorescent black is posited.
Yeah, and I also think too, like I want to say this uh mostly to cover my ass, but like I haven't lived there for 30
Yeah, yeah.
years. So I don't know what it's actually like. I don't know what it was like when these guys wrote the book. I don't know what it's like now. I know what it was like between the years of 1991 and 1995.
Those were very good years.
They were great.
I appreciate you not making fun of me for that one.
Oh, I guess I could have, but no, I
Yeah, you
didn't
could
take
have.
the opportunity to jab you. I mentioned this earlier, but I want to come back to it. Like anti-authoritarianism is a major theme in this book, right? Like the main characters are they're a street gang, but they're also like sort of automatically at odds and in conflict with the government slash corporation that rules Singapore.
Yeah, some
Uh,
of them have been ejected from Singapore for
yeah.
genetic quote unquote abnormalities. Some of them are the wrong kind of person. Some of them just don't have money and are thus, what do you call it? Not disempowered, but disenfranchised.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, like I have known for a long time that I have an anti-authoritarian streak that is sometimes problematic, uh, especially in my work life. But I didn't realize that part of it stemmed from my time in Singapore because, like, the police raided my high school, or when I went to go see Fugazi, there were armed police with machine guns lining the walls. I told this episode in our Discord episode and maybe in our Fugazi repeater episode, but like Guy Pachota wrote a letter back to me when I was a kid saying, "Yeah, Singapore, man, they don't mess around with the authority thing over there." you know?
What a what a gentle way to say it.
Yeah, but it definitely impacted my relationship with authority, maybe the military and the police. Yeah.
All right, we're still going to land back on this when we get into themes, but let's continue in production.
Yeah.
So the story was serialized. It was originally published in the pages of Heavy Metal magazine. Um, and there's this interview we found, and the question is, in what manner did the fact that Fluorescent Black was initially serialized in three parts affect your plans? And Wilson said, doing it one part at a time actually opened up the process. It gave us time to rethink the story as we continued to create it. It was originally going to be two parts, but the first part felt too compressed to us. After we finished the first book, we decided to expand the second part into two parts, giving them more time to explore the world and the characters. Fox adds, we got well into the first 48-page installment and realized the heavy metal format would allow us to expand the characters and world. The addition of a third installment really allowed the story to unfold at its own pace.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just a nice feeling, right? That the
Yeah.
serialization, the installment method, contributed to the artist's pleasure of their work.
Yeah, and I think too, like there's sort of in comic storytelling there are the terms like compressed and decompressed, and one of the things comics are great at is controlling how the reader perceives time. And it was something when I was rereading the graphic novel for this episode, I was noticing. I was like, wow, they just jump through stuff in the first few pages in a way that like I was kind of like, I wish this would slow down a little bit, but also like I was cognizant of this was appearing as like one of six serials in one issue of the magazine.
So at the time of this interview, Wilson says, I want to do another book, meaning another book of Fluorescent Black, because he had those two other books in mind, prequel and
Yeah.
sequel. It's partially written, he said, but we've got to find a way to buy ourselves some time. Now, I don't know what that means. If that just
Yeah.
means I don't want to get into a deal for it or a contract because I have other things to do, because he's talking about making the movie The Final Moments of Carl Brandt, and that's a short film, but with Paul Rubens. He was developing a TV show called Capital. Um, and he says, trying to have some fun in life.
You skipped over his description
I
of
didn't want to say
capital.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. He says, I would describe capital as a quote, totally fucked up modern mythology. I don't know what that means either. But it sounds interesting. And, I liked this, so could be cool.
Nathan Fox also agreed that he wanted to do more. As far as Fluorescent Black is concerned, I think it's agreed that we only scratched the surface and would love to continue the series. There are a few other projects and scripts of Matt's that I would and will kill to do at some point. These guys are having a lot of fun in this interview.
They were. And as far as I know, they haven't worked together since then. So yeah, maybe they will someday. I don't know. Sounds like they're both busy guys.
I also think that Wilson has a bunch of scripts that Fox probably got to read, like
Sure.
all kinds of
Yeah.
different things. Um, and there's this, okay, this is a kind of a spoiler for the book, but I want to ask you what you think of this.
Yeah.
Actually, I can make this not a spoiler. So Fox says that three characters will return in spades and some new books will be slated for production. Matt's scripts are too good to hold off for too long. Stay tuned. Chris, I'd like you to tell us all about Heavy Metal Magazine because it's clearly an influence on you because you used it as an inspiration for your own work.
Yeah, I love heavy metal magazine as a concept. I especially love like the early 70s heavy metal magazine. Um, but I wanted to insert this into the episode because the company of heavy metal magazine has had like a tumultuous history, and this book was like kind of in the middle of that, and I don't think was affected by it necessarily, but it had a rough couple of last like 5 or 6 years as we're recording this.
I have
So,
not done a lot of digging into the heavy metal history.
oh,
And a lot of the stuff that's here is news to me, especially that it was around for as long as it was and only recently stopped. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the magazine started in 1977. It is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a magazine that blends fantasy, sci-fi, and erotica. It is known specifically for its explicit nudity, sex, and violence. It was first published by National Lampoon's owners. I think Charlie and I, both being around that age, could tell you listeners that like or at least my experience with heavy metal was it was on the higher rack of the magazine
Yes.
rack in bookstores, along with like Playboy and Penthouse and stuff like that. And sometimes it was in a plastic bag so
Yeah.
that kids
It
like us couldn't just flip through it.
it wasn't quite pornographic, but it could be certain panels could be indistinguishable from pornography.
I mean, dude, I knew kids in high school who jerked off to Victoria's Secret catalog, so heavy metal would have been a step up from that.
Well, there was no internet, Chris.
It's true. It's true. We're so old. I'm
Yeah.
as old as Heavy Metal Magazine. I was born the same year it came out.
Oh
Okay,
my goodness.
so what a lot of folks don't know is actually it was originally a licensed translation of French comics from a similar magazine in Europe called, I believe it's Metal Hurlant is how you pronounce it. My French is awful.
You'd probably lose
Um,
the T at the end.
Hurlant.
There you go.
But this is where most American readers, like myself, were first exposed to really big name European creators like Mobius, who we've covered on the show before, Milo Manera, Guido Crepax, Philippe Drouet, and lots of other American and other international creators made debuts or had significant stories in heavy metal. Richard Corbin, H.R. Giger, Simon Bisley, Bernie Wrightson, Neil Adams, Barry Windsor Smith, Walt Simonson, and a real big one is Frank Frazetta. I mean, people joke nowadays of like the 70s of a sort of like psychedelic stereotype of people having like a Frank Frazetta painting airbrushed on the side of their van or something. Like this was where he was first getting exposed to pop culture.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen Heavy Metal Magazine, saying that it was very close to pornography kind of hides the fact that the art is extraordinary most of the time.
Oh yeah, it's like museum level quality in some cases, I would say. Yeah. This is just like a personal aside, but one of my prized possessions is I was at a show that heavy metal were set up at, and they had found a box of like 1970s calendars
Uh-huh.
that they had and were selling them there. So I have like I think it's the 1979 heavy metal magazine calendar, and like each month is a different piece of art from one of these like amazing artists, and it's phenomenal.
And do you mark down every time you jerk off to it?
No, because I have a subscription to Victoria's Secret.
Very good.
But one other thing I want to mention that is relevant to our interests: the adaptation of Alien the movie as a comic first appeared not in Heavy Metal Magazine, but was published by Heavy Metal Magazine in 1979. And that was written by Archie Goodwin and drawn by Walt Simonson. And if you haven't seen it, it is stunning.
The crazy thing about heavy metal is that it could be viewed as a dirty, skanky magazine, but also
Yeah.
it could be viewed as high transgressive art.
Yes, both things. And I have known people who have thought both things about it
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Now, since we were talking about heavy metal, I went digging. I found an article called A History of Cyberpunk Comics by David M. Higgins and Matthew Iung from the LA Review of Books. This is from February of 2021. William Gibson, author of Neuromancer, cites the illustrated stories that appeared in the French magazine Metal Hurlant and its American version Heavy Metal during the 1970s as influences for the imaginative style of his cyberpunk novel Neuromancer, 1984. Gibson says, it's entirely fair to say, and I've said it before, that the way Neuromancer the novel quote unquote looks was influenced in large part by some of the artwork I saw in Heavy Metal. I assume that this must also be true of John Carpenter's Escape from New York, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and all other artifacts of the style sometimes dubbed cyberpunk. Those French guys, they got their end in early.
Yeah. And I think we can extrapolate from there. The Matrix wouldn't exist without the style and aesthetic
Oh
of Heavy
yeah,
Metal
this
Magazine.
article, The History of Cyberpunk Comics, it explicitly draws a line through all the stuff that happened in cyberpunk and heavy metal to, oh God, his name is what, Jeff Darrow?
Yeah.
And his drawings, got the Wachowskis interested and they
Hmm.
asked him to come and do design for the Matrix.
Totally. So, maybe you're not familiar with Heavy Metal Magazine, but like it had a wide-ranging influence on our pop culture. Um, However, like I said earlier, it had a tumultuous history. The French edition went bankrupt in 1980. So the American edition, Heavy Metal, severed its ties with them. Uh, then, after going bankrupt, Metal Hurlant folded in 1987. And at that point, Heavy Metal had to come up with new content. They couldn't just re-letter European comics anymore. Also, some of you may be familiar, there was a Heavy Metal movie that came out in 1981, which was an entirely animated movie that adapted stories from the magazine's serials. And Charlie and I offline gushed about the soundtrack for that movie because it's pretty awesome.
It's pretty great. Cheap Trick is on it.
Hmm.
Just so no one starts thinking anything too heavy metal about that soundtrack.
Yes. Yeah. Um, in 1988, film producer Daniel Grodnick and actor producer Tim Matheson.
Tim Matheson.
Do you know Tim Matheson?
I don't know him personally.
Me either. Uh, they acquired voting control of National Lampoon Incorporated. So that I think that meant that effectively they owned Heavy Metal Magazine. And under their decision making, it increased its publishing schedule and it had a 30% increase in publication during this time. So it became much bigger in the late 80s, which is probably around the time, at least when I first became familiar with it, seeing it in, magazine racks in like convenience stores and stuff like that. Then it was 1998 where Kevin Eastman, who we mentioned already, who is one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle creators, I assume he made a good chunk of change off of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I mean, all of the franchising, or
Yeah.
the IP extension. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I love about Kevin Eastman is that with that money, he did things like buy Heavy Metal Magazine. They also created their own comics museum that I think I've mentioned on the show before that used to be in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Oh,
It,
that's
it
right.
was
Yeah, you have talked
amazing.
about that.
Yeah. Um, but so he bought it in 98, sold it in 2014, but even after he sold it, he stuck around for another 2 years as the editor in chief. So this is important because this is when Fluorescent Black is published. It is a period of relative stability in the history
Yeah.
of this magazine.
Solidly in the middle of Eastman's run.
Yeah. In 2000, there was another animated feature called Heavy Metal 2000. I have not seen that actually. I'm curious. I've never gotten around to finding a copy. And then in the late 2000s, this is interesting. David Fincher and Tim Miller wanted to make another heavy metal feature film. There's a long, arduous, that's a whole nother super context episode story around what happened with their attempt to make a feature film. Eventually, that stalled and morphed into what is now the Netflix animated television show Love, Death, and Robots, which I think maybe has 5 seasons or something like that and is pretty great.
Now, I'm not going to stop the flow of our conversation and look up every one of these people, but I think there's a lot of boomers in all of the
Mm.
stuff we're quoting. Like
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Gibson, Matheson, I think Eastman, Fincher for sure, Tim Miller, I believe. You know, Heavy Metal Magazine was really important to people who were teenagers in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so this is where things get kind of crazy. Eastman sells it, and he sells it to a digital and music veteran named David Boxenbaum and a film producer named Jeff Krelitz. And at that point, it was no longer Heavy Metal Magazine. It became Heavy Metal Media LLC. During this period, one of the really interesting creative things is that Grant Morrison, who we've talked a lot about on this show, and our show is named after, was the editor in chief for 2 years. And there was some really like creative, interesting, weird stuff that showed up again under Morrison's mentorship.
I mean, that's Grant Morrison's deal in general.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a smart move on their part to hire Morrison. But then only a couple years later, Krelitz leaves. Leadership of the magazine is in flux. By 2020, there's a new CEO named Matthew Medney and somebody referred to as their creative overlord named David Irwin. And they announced that there's going to be entirely new publishing lines outside of the magazine. So there's obviously like this idea of, well, what we were talking about earlier, like we're going to acquire IP and we're going to publish a bunch of new stuff, and that's going to be new media, and we'll make money off of that.
And what I hear behind all of this is someone saying, "Oh yeah, I know the internet is just eating up the market, but we can do something special here."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you also worked for How Stuff Works. Okay. Uh,
I did not. I think we should make that clear. There's some stuff that I don't want to be.
I swear I heard that sentence in many meetings. Uh, okay. So Wikipedia sort of boils it down so that we're not going through this saga too in depth. Fall of 2022, so this is only a couple of years ago, the magazine enters into an agreement with something called Whatnot, which is an online marketing place, and they're going to publish 12 issues of the magazine through this online marketing place.
Let me read this next part.
Okay.
Soon afterward, the magazine announced it was, quote, ceasing publication of what they described as the first volume of the magazine, which had been published continuously since 1977. The last issue of the first volume, number 320, was scheduled for publication in late October 2022, and the successor, Volume 2, would be published by Whatnot Publishing, starting with issue 1 in February 2023.
Yeah.
And yet, no.
Right, because there were, quote, cash flow problems, which subsequently led to the magazine being shut down in December of 2022. This was intended to be temporary. The magazine tried to rectify subscription non-fulfillments with its audience and non-payments to its artists and vendors. This was a big deal when it happened. There were a lot of people complaining about this. Medney stepped down as CEO. He was replaced by two other people.
Hold on. The magazine worked to rectify subscription non-fulfillments and non-payments to artists and vendors. It didn't have any money. It couldn't pay what it
Yeah.
had contracted to pay, and it wasn't producing enough of the magazine or any of the magazine possibly to get to people who had already paid them for subscriptions.
hmm So we get to July of 2023. So this is what, 7 months after the magazine falls apart. Whatnot only produced one issue, number 320. It was released in April of that year, but they still listed this new company, Heavy Metal Entertainment LLC, on the indicia.
Which is different than heavy metal media.
Totally. So it turned into yet another company. And it was announced that the publisher then decided we're just going to cancel the magazine. This is the last issue of the magazine. So essentially, they tried to put it out through a different publisher. That didn't work out. There were financial issues. They put out one more issue and then called it quits. Uh, Cut to about a year ago, October 15th, 2024. Now we have a third LLC. This is Heavy Metal International LLC. So
Limited liability companies allow you to limit your liability.
for sure they do. So limited that rather than come up with the money themselves, they ran a Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign for the first issue of November 25th, 2024. Now, that sounds snarky on my part. I ran a Kickstarter crowdfunding
Yeah,
campaign to
I
fund
was
my magazine.
I was
Yeah.
about to say that
Yeah.
it's easy to be snarky because it seems like if you read between the lines, this is, companies didn't pay the people who made the magazine.
I'm snarky about it because the editorial staff recorder was three people. This was a company that had been bought and sold, it seems like three or four times in the span of 5 years, with multiple, it sounded like venture capital behind it. And they weren't paying their artists or fulfilling their obligations to their audience. Like it just sounds shady all around.
The
The
other story could be, though,
mm,
that people who want it to exist are trying to untangle it from uh, leveraged debt or, bankruptcy filings or whatever else. Just
so
trying to get clear of it.
I don't know too much about this current iteration, but that is the narrative that they have put out there, which is like, we really care about the magazine. We want to bring it back. We want it to exist in the world. Whereas, like, it seemed like these other LLCs were trying to, so this is not in the notes, but if I remember correctly, there was some component of these LLCs that was related to NFTs, where they
Oh
were going to do
God.
heavy metal NFTs. and some kind of crypto deal. So like this is the world that we're talking about here.
I gotta tell you, I don't have anything to back this up beyond the popular news of crypto and
Yeah.
NFTs, but it seems like that's just not a thing that uh, you can trust. Maybe the people who work in it are a mixture of trustworthy and untrustworthy, like most things. But it just feels like crypto and NFTs as ventures, uh, they are either quite scammy or they bite unscammy people on the ass when they try to use them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. In fact, I would say like one of the hallmarks of our culture over the last 10 years is everything feels like it's becoming more scammy. And I think that that is somewhat at the heart of it. It's also somewhat, that a bunch of crooks are running our country too, like it feels like scam artists have been given permission to just run wild, you know. Uh, this is wow, we're really digressing here, but
Well, we're about to finish this part.
there is a scam in Massachusetts right now where you will receive a text message that is ostensibly from the state of Massachusetts telling you that your toll bills haven't been paid.
Oh God, yeah,
And if you click on it, it's,
yeah, let it go, right?
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
Kickstarter, last updated May 30th, 2025. They have gathered almost $783,000,
Okay.
uh, above a $5,000 goal.
That's significantly more than we raised for Corridor. So, good for them.
Well,
Hopefully
Corridor didn't have 50 years of, brand name.
this is true. Yeah.
So it looks like this should happen. Right now, it says backer kit pre-order. This project was successfully funded on Kickstarter with, you know, 11.5 thousand backers, fully funded in December of 2024. And there's pre-orders available for multiple issues. All right.
Okay. So we'll see. I hope it comes out and I hope it's great and I hope it gets another 50 years.
Let me be completely accurate. Pre-orders for a number of variant covers of Heavy Metal #1. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's finish up production and then we can take a quick break. So, this came out in Heavy Metal originally, but then it was published as its own book by Heavy Metal as a publishing company. Nathan Fox talked about this a little bit. I didn't realize this from flipping through the book, but the original graphic novel, he said that the result of the finished version was really humbling and amazing to them. They hired a company called One Trick Pony that did the design for the book and led the way for how the finished graphic novel was compiled. So there's like all kinds of extra content in here, like maps and commentary and imagery and stuff like that. There's some pinups. It's a cool package.
Yeah. I mean, this is not unique, but it does feel like a book. It doesn't feel like a serialized, comic story where you get the end of an issue and
Yeah.
then you flip the page and the start of the next issue. It does feel like sort of a single, unrelenting narrative.
And I think too, like let's cap this off. Maybe the reason why this is out of print is because of all of these issues going on with the parent company. Like maybe if there's some stability that comes to heavy metal as a brand, we'll see not only like a new edition of this book, but maybe those sequels eventually.
I mean, let's see how many contracts go from one company to another company to another company to another company. Hey, Chris, it's another break.
I wasn't prepared for
You weren't
that.
prepared.
Yeah, what are we supposed to
One, two,
talk?
three, repeater. Hey, Chris, it's another break.
Oh yeah, yeah. Here we are. What are we going to talk about during this break? Let's see. We don't have a record label to talk about.
We
What
don't have a
else?
fellow podcast.
Yeah.
We don't have much of anything except a
Um,
Patreon page.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, they can go to patreon.com/supercontext. Listeners, you can pay $1 a month and you will get access to every episode and access to all the content that we've put out over the last, I don't know, what is it now, Charlie? Like 9 years? That
With a little break in the middle.
yeah, with a little 5 year break in the middle. But There's tons of content. We recorded a bunch of extra episodes, mini episodes. There's bloopers, all kinds of fun stuff over there.
Oh, Super King context. I'm going to listen to some of those pretty soon. And we're back. I tell you, Chris, something that doing Super Context has really made me take in is that it's a miracle that anybody reads, sees, or hears anything.
Yeah. Yeah, well, especially right now, right? Because like there's such a flood of quote content that like there's no room
Yeah.
for other things. There's no way you I mean there is you can build an audience, but it is extremely difficult.
We talk about a band signs to a major label and
Yeah.
they might have a moment of thinking, hey, we did it, but they didn't. And
Right.
most of them just kind of keep going and it doesn't quite happen and, whatever. And I think that getting published can sometimes feel like, hey, I did it. And you
Yeah.
haven't. Like, there's still more that has to happen. You get your movie made, Bill Murray's in it, it gets good reviews, it goes out into the world, and it just drops. Nothing happens.
Wow, man, are you coming at Sophia Coppola right now? Like what?
No.
Who's Bill Murray in
He's
your
in that
movie?
movie Riff Raff that just came out that was getting kind of, yeah, you don't even know what that
I
movie
don't know
is.
what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And you remember Get Low that he was in?
No.
Yeah. So I think probably people felt a little bit like, and we got Bill Murray.
Yeah.
He's, the star or he's the first supporting actor, and this is going to
Yeah.
be great. And it still didn't fly.
Yeah, it's not what it used to be. Um, yeah, it's interesting. So, okay, tell me why Fluorescent Black is bringing that up for you.
Because we couldn't find hardly anything
I
about
know.
reviews or, appreciations. And it's worth it. I mean, we've been all around the block on this, right?
Yeah,
But it's a good comic.
I think
It's
so too. Yeah.
vibrant and it pulls you along, and there's a lot in it, and it's fun to read, and it's also kind of sad.
And not only that, but it had like a little bit of Hollywood heat behind it, like whether you like that or not.
Yeah, like they were doing it, and it just didn't keep living. And there's some stuff that there's a new fucking reprint of it every 3 years.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff that just it does all the things it's supposed to do, and it still does not get the play that you'd like it to get.
Well, I have a theory why, but I think let's look at some of the reviews, which there were very few of, to see what other people thought, because we may be wrong. Like maybe people just don't like this. So
Well, it's interesting. The one of the reviews we found actually is not nearly as appreciative as I would have expected.
right. Well, yeah, there were very few, and the ones that I found that were well articulated didn't like it. So this is from a blog called the Read Rant blog, the writer of which says, the plot of Fluorescent Black sounds very familiar because it is. Its main fault is that it falls prey to the common sci-fi trapping of having a weak emotional core. Wilson put more thought into his ideas than his characters. Um, I mean,
Let's not adjudicate the
yeah,
review.
I'm not going to adjudicate it, but I think these characters, at least the like main like three or four characters, uh, I wouldn't say they're three-dimensional, but they're no more two-dimensional than most comics or films that come out nowadays.
Well, here's the thing. This review um, sounds a bit familiar because it is. It falls prey to all of the common internet review problems. It uses second person to describe the reviewer's reactions. It assumes a universality to those reactions. It
Yeah,
does not provide any step by step understanding of how a method achieved or did not achieve the effect that the authors were going for. The example of a gem of Singlish that it calls out does not appear to be anything different from all the other examples of Singlish that are
yeah,
in the
yeah.
comic.
Well,
It
let's
it's
unpack that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they complain about this English. They say that that's a fault of the story, that the dialogue is unreadable,
Well,
and
let's
that
read the actual quote, right?
okay,
The other significant fault of Fluorescent Black is its dialogue. The characters speak Singlish. The idea to use this real and unique dialect is a testament to Wilson's thought and originality. In his introduction, Wilson asks us to listen to Singlish and tell him it's not cool. Indeed, it may be, but while in a comic, it proves problematic. While you do get the occasional gem, quote, I leaky like my uncle's old dick, the end result is more hindrance than flavorful. I don't know what any of that means.
Can I ask you? So this is one of the reasons why I put this review in. Like, I understand Singlish because like I grew up around it, and I know the cadence. And so as I was reading it, I heard it in. There's sort of a sing-songy
Yeah,
quality to the cadence of it. Did you have trouble understanding what was going on?
no, and if I can be very clear, the only part of that chunk that I really understand is I leaky like my uncle's old dick. I know what that means,
Yeah.
but Singlish may be cool, but while in a comic it proves problematic, you get an occasional gem. The end result is more hindrance than flavorful. Those words don't mean what that's supposed to mean, is my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think that right. I understand what this writer is trying to get across, but they don't make their argument clearly.
This is not a super context about this review, though.
No, no.
This review is in here because it complements and contradicts some of the stuff that we heard the creators talk about.
Yeah, yeah. But the review also gives it thumbs up for some things. They say that Wilson did an incredible job creating the futuristic Singapore that's here, that it puts a unique spin on classic themes. And the two things that it's undeniably successful at are visceral beauty and an overabundance of ideas, and that this is largely because of Nathan Fox's work.
Yeah. Um, at the size of the book is where the reviewer says Nathan Fox is at his best.
Hmm.
And here's this I enjoyed this bit. His line work is a bit sketchier and unpolished than what you may have seen in his recent work for Marvel. At times, this fits perfectly, others not so much, but the variations in Fox's style to fit the story are remarkable. When he needs to capture the grittiness of the dystopian landscapes or the shit and blood of a brawl, Fox utilizes a post Jeff Darrow, oh, there he is again, style. You've never seen so many lines. But when comedy or tenderness is called for, his lines become almost cartoonish, which is so endearing. And all this is unified by Fox's usual post Paul Pope style, which is wonderful to begin with.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, that sounds accurate to me, but it also assumes that you know Paul Pope and Jeff Darrow's art styles. And I would assume too, like, uh, I'm doing a lot of guesswork here, but if you're doing work for Marvel versus like a creator-owned thing for heavy metal, there's going to be a lot more restrictions around like your art style and what an editor is asking you for.
Yeah, I mean, they described their relationship to heavy metal as one of freedom and being able
Yeah.
to experiment and do what they wanted to do. Uh,
Yep.
the review also says the colorist, Jeremy Cox, never gets the tone wrong. And Sean Conote letters. Then they kind of say that the lettering is bad.
This I'll agree with. There's some issues with the lettering in this book. Some of the bubbles are either too small or too big. Yeah, this is actually true. This sentence says there are times when the balloons are too oddly shaped, covering key art points, missing tails and causing confusion. Worst of all, sometimes the dialogue is just plain cut. Yeah.
Yeah. That made me think that this was originally French.
Oh, yeah,
My
yeah.
first thought was, oh gosh, right, heavy metal. The French
Hmm.
connection. Wilson and Fox must be, French creators.
No, yeah. Yeah, you see that with manga adaptations sometimes that the lettering balloons are like way bigger
Yeah.
than they would need to be for the English, but it's because the balloons were made that size for Japanese.
Yeah. So that was the main review that we could find, and it was from a blog. It was not from a,
Yeah. There's
published comics journalism.
nope. No, I didn't find anything on any of those places. No one, and Maybe it's because comics journalism is in such a state that most of the sites that were around back in 2008 or 2010 are gone now, and that's why nothing showed up. But
Yeah, there is sort of a digital dark age, in that
mhm.
transition from all paper to all electronic, but not saving the electronic the way you save the
Yeah,
paper.
yeah. Let's pivot to representation because this is where I think we're going to have an interesting conversation just between the two of us. But so there is literally nothing in the research about representation. I think that something that's worth noting about this comic is it takes place in Southeast Asia. That's an unusual setting for an American comic. The characters in it are primarily from there. So you've got a mixture of Southeast Asian ethnicities. Um, it's never specifically addressed, but I'm pretty sure the protagonist is meant to be white, and I think they're twins, right? The
Hmm.
Max and his sister, um, and I'm assuming that that is a real thing in Singapore. Like it's a British colony, so there is a certain percentage of white people that live there. Um, but it's just, you don't normally see like Malay, Indonesian, Chinese, Indian, all these different types of ethnicities in a story like this. And so that I think is worth pointing out.
Yeah, but then also some of those ethnicities are just presented as that ethnicity or that particular quality, and
Yeah.
then there's nothing much to it. It
Oh, for sure. Nobody
the
talks about
visual,
their
yeah,
cultural identity.
the
Yeah.
visual representation is there. There's an odd kind of pro-transgender idea in there
Hmm.
because one of our heroes has been declared genetically inferior because she is transgender.
Yeah.
However, she's also kind of a caricature of
Yeah.
the idea of the uh, I know this is offensive, but a caricature of the lady boy.
No, that's literally what
I,
they call her
I
in
know,
there. Yeah.
I know, uh, but I don't know. I find myself trying to remember what it was like encountering characters who didn't look like me in comics in 2008. But
Yeah.
I wasn't really there in 2008.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is comics, especially indie comics, are at a place right now in 2025 where there's more inclusion than there ever has been before, especially if you're queer. Um, in 2008, sure, there would occasionally be trans characters, or like I think about The Invisibles, right? The
Hmm.
Invisibles had, I don't even know that they use the term transgender, but because Fanny would like alternate back and forth between male and female identities. But it was nice to see the inclusion, right? To like have that actually in there. It's a step in the right direction that I think helped us get to where we are now.
Yeah, there was a lot of engagement with the ideas, but kind of on a surface level
Yes.
of equity, of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And I think a big part of why people started to think very seriously, and even academically, about those things was because the media got ahead of the general cultural understanding. Not the media, the entertainment got ahead of the general cultural understanding of people with different backgrounds and different sexual identities.
Hmm.
I I even remember like watching things that were reruns from the 70s. It seemed like there were much more grounded portrayals of women, gay characters, people from different ethnic and cultural backgrounds or different nations. Not that there wasn't also Latka from Taxi and stuff like
Sure.
that.
Yeah, there were stereotypes, but I like this direction that you're headed in because this is where my head's at too, right? Like the 70s for popular culture, I mean, that's when heavy metal magazines started, were a lot more accepting of transgressive attempts, whether or not they were accurate. representations or portrayals. It was people tried. Something that I keep coming back to over and over again, I've hinted throughout this whole episode, is like a sort of overarching theme for me right now is that feeling of transgressive art pushing our culture forward feels absent to me, and it has felt absent for at least a decade, if not longer. So, and I was thinking about this book, right? Like, it is, I think it's very transgressive, but, not just because of the sex and violence, but also because of like the sci-fi themes of genetics and the implications for eugenics, like lots of big ideas there, right?
Yeah.
About superior versus inferior. Um, I think that one of the reasons why this isn't adapted is because of that. I think like there's just the ideas are too big, the sex is too much, the nudity is too much, and the violence is too much. And in some cases, it's gratuitous. I won't deny that. But I think to make a sci-fi movie with a budget like this, where there's like superpowers and lots of special effects and
Gunfights and car chases
totally, yeah,
and
like
body transformations. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That it's unlikely that someone's going to invest 50 million, $100 million in something like that if it's got these elements in it.
Yeah.
You mentioned Fury Road earlier. I think Fury Road has some of that going on with it, but it was also the fourth part in like a proven franchise.
Yeah. Can you can you say what you think transgressive is? And I don't mean content, but I mean like
Yeah.
what does it do?
So I think of transgressive art as being something that pushes at the limits of what society finds acceptable. And when those limits are pushed, it helps society to think from a different perspective about things. And I think where we are today is because of some of that transgressive art. And I'm glad you asked, actually. So I wanted to do a little experiment here.
Okay.
I have been trying to think about this. What in the last 10 years has come out that felt transgressive in film or TV or comics um, in a way that didn't feel necessarily exploitative or othering, right?
Oh,
Compared to, and I'm using the 70s as a comparison, right? Like,
yeah.
let's think about Pink Flamingos or Cruising, right? Um,
Oh, those are
I
two very different things, dude.
For sure, but they were early exposure for public audiences to queer identities.
Yeah. Okay. The first thing that comes to mind is Too Old to Die Young, although that's very close to exploitation, very close to othering, except there's a case to be made that every sort of push of certain characters into the other is then balanced out by that character pushing other characters into the other,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, and so I pulled up a list on a website that has quote unquote the ultimate list of transgressive movies, and one of the movies on there is Neon Demon. So
Oh,
another
by the
Wending
same
Refn,
director, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think probably um, a couple that came to mind for me. Again, French, not great at it. Titan, I think is how you pronounce this movie.
Okay.
I know you haven't seen this, but that was pretty boundary pushing. I would say that Aronofsky movie Mother was pretty boundary pushing. I saw people get up and walk out of the movie theater.
Hmm.
Um, there's some horror movies that have come out recently that they're transgressive, but I don't think, at least in my opinion, I didn't feel like the transgression was worth it. Like it wasn't like it was a shock factor. One is a Turkish horror movie called Baskin, and another is I think it's Korean maybe called The Sadness, which have some pretty horrific like real gross stuff in it. So I'm thinking through this. So this is where I use ChatGPT.
Okay.
I was like pulling up lists and the lists weren't matching, and I was like, all right, this is actually like a good use of this AI tool because it'll scan the internet and tell me, here's the general consensus on what is quote unquote transgressive in the last 10 years. Um, and these are the ones that it listed. I don't know how much of this you've consumed. Titan was one of them. The Substance. Did you see The Substance last year?
I haven't.
I don't know that I would call that a movie transgressive. It was interesting, but I don't know that it pushed boundaries necessarily. There's a couple horror movies on here. I'm not going to read everything. Here's here's one that like we did an episode on this, and I do not think this is transgressive. Lovecraft Country.
I'm going to say once you add Lovecraft Country to a list like this, then clearly transgressive has a different meaning
Yeah,
than the one that you posited. Maybe transgressive in that it goes against some accepted rules of genre or against the values of the creator or the IP or something like that.
yeah.
But Lovecraft Country did not push the boundaries of what could be presented or considered in art.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I think I enjoyed it, and I think there's a lot there to it that is worth thinking about, especially, we talked about representation and diversity in our Lovecraft Country episode, but um yeah, there's I don't know, like one, I think like the term transgressive is subjective, what people mean when
Hmm.
they say that. But also this is where the AI thing comes in, right? The AI is just like yanking anytime it scans the word transgressive in association with
Right.
movies. It's not making a subjective judgment about whether one thing qualifies or not.
And it could also be doing things like pulling synonyms. So whenever someone says crossed a line or
Hmm.
boundary crossing, or if something is genre boundary crossing, that might be where
Totally.
Lovecraft Country gets scooped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed though that like one of the things that's happening here, and to connect it back to Fluorescent Black, there's a certain amount of grossness equals transgressive.
Yeah, exactly. So I think to me, that's the difference, right? The difference is um, exploitation or shock versus like true transgression is like it's part of the story for a reason, and that reason is pushing the boundaries of what we understand to be acceptable.
Okay. That's that gets us into dangerous territory. If we
Yeah,
start talking about heavy metals, representation of women, and sexual assault
exactly.
as sort of standards for stories.
Yeah, so one of the articles that we pulled, and for everybody, the show notes are going to include links to all of these articles. Specifically brings up that the magazine was taken to task many times because its stories were seen as juvenile because of the violence and the misogynistic portrayals of women. And this is a complaint I have heard people make throughout the comics industry, people who aren't fans of comics who see it on, no pun intended, the racks in bookstores. Here's something that's interesting. One of our listeners is cited here.
Really?
Critic R.M. Rhodes, who is somebody I know
Oh
listens
my
to the
gosh,
show
yeah.
and has written to us before, was one of the people that wrote about this and says the abundance of breasts in the magazine was somewhat of a running joke over the years, which
I
is
mean,
true.
yeah, we said the thing about it being masturbation material
Yeah.
for some people. Uh, it is hard to, gosh. So it is transgressive to portray rape and to portray the thinking that leads to rape, the
Yeah.
thinking that leads to serial killing, to portray evil people as complicated characters deserving of our sympathy.
Hmm.
But also, it can feel simply like, as Rhodes says here, tragically, it's mostly used as just another plot point with no mention or indication of the consequences.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the difference of what I was trying to articulate earlier, and just I think because of the backlash against the stuff that is just, using TNA as plot material has subsequently led to it being excised out of everything. So
Mm.
everything feels a little bit like the edges have been filed off.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I did mention up top, like I was kind of dismissive of the regular use of a camera angle in fluorescent black to go up a skirt
Yeah.
to try and get a shot of an ass in very small underwear, or
Uh-huh.
to get the sort of voyeuristic look at a female body.
I think this book has a male gaze. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it does very much so. And I think I called it out because there was a little bit of liking it, you know, but also recognizing like that's sort of that's a very youthful and unsympathetic enjoyment.
Hmm. Hmm. But I think it's possible to maybe not have a male gaze, but I think it's possible to show the female nude body in a story and have it uh, be contextually appropriate and contribute to the storytelling.
It's totally possible. It does seem like we are burnt out a bit because there is so much tits and dragons style. Uh, what's it? Sex position. You know, if you have to
Hmm.
lay out some plot points, go ahead and have a naked person doing it so that it is still it holds the viewer,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
I don't know. Just something worth unpacking. And like, for me as a reader and a creator, like one of the things I liked about Fluorescent Black was that it had that stuff in it, but that it didn't. Yes, there's a male gaze, but it didn't always feel gratuitous, right? Like there are scenes where the main characters are hanging out back at their base, for lack of a better term, and they're just all naked.
yeah,
Like, and it's just because that's just how it's not like storytelling. There's a reason for it. They're not having sex with each other. They just like literally just all take their clothes off when they get home and just hang around naked.
there's a certain amount of clothes are not fashion is not important. Clothes are
Yeah.
functional, and if you're not in the world stealing, attacking, protecting yourself, then you don't need your armor. You don't need your clothes. You don't have to
Right.
present a self through your clothing.
It felt part of the world building.
Yeah. Now, in that history of cyberpunk comics, I found this section. Um, I don't want to get too deep into it because there's a lot of Kristeva in it, but it does kind of lay out a line from early heavy metal to the cyberpunk nature of Fluorescent Black.
Okay.
So uh, they talk about a story called The Long Tomorrow, in which a private eye in a hard-boiled story, finds the lost thing that the femme fatale came to him to ask for him to find, and they have sex as a kind of culmination of that quest. But then he gets a phone call, and the phone call is, the woman who hired you is an alien. And when he hears that, he looks back at the woman that he is in the middle of having sex with, and she's turned into a kind of a conglomeration of tentacles and tubes and fur and all that. And she is latched onto him. And he finally
Hmm.
gets her off of him and he shoots her to death. And that's the story. That's called The Long Tomorrow. It was by O'Bannon and Mobius. Like Dan
Let's back up
O'Bannon,
for a second. Dan O'Bannon
Dan O'Bannon,
of Alien
Alien
fame
fame,
and
Mobius.
no, and what else did Dan O'Bannon write?
You do it. Come on. I don't know what.
Life Force,
Jesus Christ.
a movie that's literally like about a naked alien woman just walking around the whole film.
You're absolutely right. Toby Hooper is also responsible for some of that.
For sure, yeah. And Mobius, as amazing of an artist as Mobius was, like, yeah, there was lots of. I mean, we did an episode about Mobius and Jodorowsky's
Yeah,
uh, s- Sacred Woman of the Sacred Heart. What was that book called?
I don't remember, and I don't want to lose track of this.
Yeah.
I saw one of the frames from that comic book story, The Long
Yeah.
Tomorrow, and it's the shot of him trying to pull this alien, just kind of chaos off of him, and some of his tentacles are wrapped around his genitals and are pulling
Hmm.
them, and it's still beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
striking image, and the lines are perfect, and the imagery of it is compelling. Um, so that was kind of weird to experience. Um, but then the authors of A History of Cyberpunk Comics say The Long Tomorrow expresses just one example of how cyberpunk style stories often have troubling foundations in misogyny. As Julia Kristeva observes in Powers of Horror, many forms of misogyny originate in the psychological dynamic of abjection, whereby the masculine subject, in order to achieve a sense of independence and self possession, violently casts away an abject feminine filth object that was, at an earlier moment, literally merged with oneself, often as a former sexual partner. Kristeva might suggest that The Long Tomorrow offers a story in which abjection assists in restoring a feeling of self contained masculinity.
Huh.
Now,
Okay.
there's more about that, and discussion of like critiques of capitalism that are built into the attempt to reclaim masculinity. But
Sure.
they also write in the setting of The Long Tomorrow and other proto cyberpunk comics, male protagonists often feel hopelessly disempowered in the face of growing class and wealth inequality.
Hmm.
Check. Stories take place in dystopian cities divided between the rich and the poor. Check. Dominated by massive corrupt multinational corporations. Check. That are immune to government regulation. As Carl Friedman has argued in his book Critical Theory and Science Fiction, this mapping of economic and social conditions is often registered in cyberpunk stories in an uncritical and hopeless way. So what Fluorescent Black did, despite the easy shots of naked bodies,
Yeah.
it reverses that whole discarding of the abject feminine filth object, where it actually becomes the casting away of a abject masculine filth object
Hmm.
after a mental bonding and synthesis in almost the exact same proto cyberpunk frame as laid out by Higgins and Jung.
I'm glad you included this. This is gonna be a long episode, but it makes me think of two things. First of all, I want to go back to that sentence that you used as a checklist. So yeah, like all of those things are in fluorescent black, and I think you're not wrong in that. Like the analysis, sort of like how fluorescent black echoes this theory here. However, that sentence, I feel like you just described modern day America.
I mean,
Dystopian
it
cities
certainly feels that way, yes.
divided by the rich and the poor, dominated by massive corrupt multinational corporations, immune to government regulation. That is literally the world we exist in right now. We live in the dystopia that people imagined in the 70s and 80s.
Except you and I are sitting in uh, brightly lit, clean places, talking on the internet, recording a podcast.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of room for podcasts in Blade Runner. Then the other thing it makes me think of is the inverse of this Long Tomorrow story, which is the end of They Live. It's the same
Oh
thing,
yeah,
but
that's
the
awesome.
man is the one who's the alien.
Yeah. Hey, baby, what's wrong?
And that is like gratuitous TNA.
Oh, for sure.
Do you
But
remember that scene? Yeah.
John Carpenter already got a shout out from William Gibson in this episode.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting to me. Like I think there's something here. I'm not disagreeing with this article at all. But yeah. And I would say They Live is somewhat transgressive. The other movie, I don't know if you've ever seen Possession before, but Possession ends in a similar way too, where the lead female character is seen at the end having sex with this like weird tentacle monster thing that has no context within the story.
Holy shit. No, I've never
Um,
seen that.
oh, you haven't? That's a fantastic movie, but yeah, there's something going on at this period of time.
Well, we are far afield, but I think everyone who has sex at one point or another has a moment where they feel like, I don't even understand the person I'm with.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if I don't know if I relate to that.
So there's no regulation to talk of with Fluorescent Black because, as we've discussed, they got to do what they wanted.
Yeah. So that leads us into the end of the episode. And I think this is actually like a good place for a segue into transhumanism. That's what this is about. Like they never come out and use that terminology, but transhumanism is what Fluorescent Black is positing, both from the side of um the sort of poor street gang who are modifying their own bodies with, like illegal narcotics or like body parts they're buying off the black market, or these like rich geneticists who are like building the ultimate superior human being.
And that ultimate superior human being has a bit of the singularity to her because she absorbs consciousnesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what I did was I went looking for sort of states of the union about transhumanism and genetics around the time that Wilson would have been writing this. This is just for us to get into it.
Okay.
So I found this. Francis Fukuyama wrote in Foreign Policy in 2004, that's a journal. Transhumanism's advocates think they understand what constitutes a good human being, and they are happy to leave behind the limited, mortal, natural beings they see around them in favor of something better. But do they really comprehend ultimate human goods? We may unwittingly invite the transhumanists to deface humanity with their genetic bulldozers and psychotropic shopping malls. So that feels like the end of a review of Fluorescent Black.
It's interesting. This is right around the same time. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a George W. Bush State of the Union speech when the arguments about stem cells were really big and like whether or not it was moral to
Yeah,
use
yeah, yeah,
stem
yeah.
cells. And you have to go back and look at the transcript. I don't remember the exact quote, but he was very adamantly talking about how his administration would stand up against any human animal hybrids that were somehow like I remember watching it and being like, where did this come from? Like all of a sudden we're on Dr. Moreau's island, and it was because this stuff was in the air.
Yeah, and also people who are worried about gay marriage leading to people marrying animals are
Yes.
also going to be worried about genetic transformation leading to animal hybrids in people.
Yep. Yep.
So I also found an article about genetics and sort of the state of the world at the time. This was from the New York Times, an
Oh, that
editorial
little
article.
rag.
Yeah, that old rag, called A Challenge to Gene Theory, a Tougher Look at Biotech. Last month, this is in 2007, last month, a consortium of scientists published findings that challenge the traditional view of how genes function. The exhaustive 4 year effort was organized by the United States National Human Genome Research Institute and carried out by 35 groups from 80 organizations around the world. To their surprise, researchers found that the human genome might not be a tidy collection of independent genes after all, with each sequence of DNA linked to a single function, such as a predisposition to diabetes or heart disease. Instead, genes appear to operate in a complex network and interact and overlap with one another and with other components in ways not yet fully understood. I feel like Francis Fukuyama's take on transhumanism in 2004 and the New York Times' attempt to summarize what people knew about genes in
Yeah.
2007, I feel like this is what's in some way fueling Fluorescent Black.
It could be. Yeah. Wilson himself says he doesn't cite either of those pieces, but he does say his biggest influence was Paul DeFilippo's book Ribofunk and David Cronenberg's venereal horror movies. I've never heard venereal horror
Oh,
before
have you
this.
not? Oh,
No,
yeah.
but it obviously makes sense, but I've never
Yeah.
heard
And
that terminology.
that's a particular chunk of David Cronenberg's work. The venereal horror is the stuff that's like about sex and
Yeah,
genitals and mixture, as opposed to the kind of
The Brood.
um, Yeah, the Brood and even Videodrome and The
Oh
Fly
yeah.
a little bit. Um, it's the oh, what was that first one? Is it Slither? That's not right. Shivers, about the slugs that crawl up into people in the bathtub.
Now, to be fair to you, there is also a movie called Slither about slugs.
Well, yeah, and they're all connected. And then Night of the
Yeah,
Creeps is the same movie again.
yeah,
Oh wait,
yeah.
Night of the Creeps was beforehand. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, man. I thought about Cronenberg the whole time I was reading Fluorescent Black. I've never read Paul DeFilippo, but secondhand, someone told me that some of his stuff is just like gross sex stuff.
Okay, interesting. That kind of makes me want to check it out. Yeah, I'd say the Cronenberg work that this makes me think of the most is Existence.
Yes. Yeah. That's a really good movie that's also really bad.
But it's a product of its time. But I would say like Existence is probably another example of um like sci-fi that probably wouldn't have been possible without heavy metal.
Yeah. So Wilson is declaring a new genre. Because I don't have much knowledge of people calling stuff biopunk. I feel like this was a push. He said, when I say biopunk, I mean ribofunk from DeFilippo and David Cronenberg's venereal horror. It's a relatively new genre that is starting to spread its seed in literature and cinema. It's full of sex and blood and guts and bodily fluids, almost like some of the early slasher pictures. And there's always a certain weirdness to it. And he says, it's not like William Gibson or Philip K. Dick. Uh, the thing that we share in common with those authors is the punk part. And then he says this: punk is always geared toward kill the rich, take down the corporations, and destroy the system. So I'd say I was influenced by the punk part. I I take issue with that.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I would rather you take issue with it than I do. Yeah.
I do feel like that is a diminishment of punk as a
Yeah.
cultural movement and a reduction of a grand tradition of social commentary.
Yeah, I'd say it's a grossly simplistic uh, idea of what punk means. But it also sounds like um, maybe what people outside of that culture perceive it to be.
Certainly, folks outside of hardcore.
But also, I want to say, like, you're right. Like, I hadn't really heard of biopunk all that much either. But then, like, doing the research for this episode, like, it has lots of stuff written about it online. There's plenty of discussion about what constitutes it as a genre. But this feels like it was trying to push it into a little bit more popular consciousness.
Yeah, Wilson has a bunch of images here that he lists as what embody biopunk. A mother digging through a slippery pile of guts to find a kidney you're going to implant into your child. A man injecting himself with frog and blowfish hormones to stop the progress of a man-made virus that's infecting your body. And then in this next one, he uses the word transsexual. I'm not totally happy with that, but it was of the time. It's a transsexual growing new genitalia. It's a punk rocker who has tailored their genome so that they will be covered in fish scales from head to toe. It's weird, it's gross, it's biological, it's natural and unnatural at the same time.
Okay.
Transhumanism
Yeah, that's what
and
it sounds like to me.
yeah,
Uh,
and rejection of the niceties of mainstream suburban America.
I mean, I cyberpunk is you know how I feel about genre. Like it drives me crazy sometimes, and I think largely it's a marketing tool. Cyberpunk, by and large, has become that, right? Like, it's a way to sell things now. And biopunk is fine, but like everything he's describing here sounds like transhumanism to me, like as we understand it as like something that exists in the real world.
Yeah, and he has a certain philosophical value that he's putting out into the world that he talks about in terms of his own life. He says, I think science is always going to evolve. You cannot stop progress. This is what he was saying at the time that this book was coming out.
Yeah.
Personally, I love the increased pace at which the world is changing. I love thinking about where we might be in 50 years. Unlike a lot of people, I am not afraid of all the tampering with genetics and stem cells and cloning. I say let's kill the sacred cows. I want to start seeing cloning, bioartistry, and man-made splices. I mean, it's going to happen someday. If the right guys don't do it, the wrong ones will. I think it's better if it's sanctioned and managed than if it happens off the radar.
So I feel conflicted about this statement from him. On one hand, I don't disagree. One thing in particular that just popped into my head about this that I did not intend to talk about in this episode, but my uncle had cancer and went through treatment, and he it was stem cell treatment, and
Mm,
he it is in remission and he's healthy now. So yes, like I'm very happy that we've made those biological um, leaps, but he is talking about regulation being involved here, but there's also like a kind of like Wild West style of what he's speaking
well,
of.
he did talk about liking the punk side of things, in his
Sure.
art, but
Yeah. Yeah.
then there's not a lot of punk in the idea that it's better if it's sanctioned and managed.
And I don't think I'm accusing him of this, but I think I'm especially sensitive to stuff like this right now as we're recording it because there's a lot of tech bros who say shit like this. Um, and in some ways they're talking about eugenics.
Mm.
Um, and I don't think that's what this guy is talking about because this book is about why eugenics is bad, right? Like the division that it creates between these people and the violence that occurs as a result of it. Like I don't think he's advocating for eugenics, but there is I don't know, in the air right now, 15 years after this guy did this interview, there is like sort of gross irresponsibility about this stuff.
I mean, I think you're talking a little bit about the reframing of autism as a thing that's impossible to live with.
Oh my God, yes. I wasn't, but yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah. Autism is being talked about as somebody being genetically inferior. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's coming from the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, or the
correct.
Secretary of Health and Human Services. Uh, and yeah, that's a problem. Um, it is something we're going to be dealing with for the next 4 to 40 years because of the way that things are being injected into the popular consciousness.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean we touched on this briefly before too. Like I thought that even though it was somewhat minor that the inclusion of a transgender character in this story was a bit of representation that was unusual at the time. At the same time, within the context of this story, that character was talked about as being genetically inferior because of their predisposition. Uh, we're seeing that right now in our
Yeah,
real world too.
yeah.
Like that is how this administration is talking about trans people.
This is a terrible place to get to near the end of the episode. I want to pull back to Nathan Fox. Uh, this is a very lovely example of collaborators who don't agree on everything, and in doing so, kind of come to a more interesting work of art. Nathan Fox says explicitly, I'm not so sure about the positive aspects of where genetic science is headed. It's not a perfect world, and human error is all too common. So, that said, I am pretty open to supporting advancements in genetics and biology. My only hope is that some sacred cows will survive. And Wilson said explicitly, let's kill the sacred cows, uh, at least in terms of their social impact on some of the future generations' way of life. Safe food and biology, health and medicine, earth sciences, and environmental advancements. I too would like to see a lot of barriers torn down and science lifted up to a new level of development. There is no way to stop people from creating a society infused with technology. We are kind of living in one as we speak. Computers the size of phones, genetics kits, etc. There's no real way to know how it will all go. So, with a bit of civility and caution and a lot of support, genetics and science should continue to evolve and accelerate. Someone will lead the way, hopefully with transparency and humanity in mind. It's a really
So
lovely sentiment.
it is, yeah. I guess what I would ask you is after reading that quote, how do you feel about where we are now, 15 years in their future after these guys said these things?
Gosh.
Wh-
Um,
or I guess, where are we on the trajectory? Are we on the Nathan Fox trajectory, or are we on the MF Wilson trajectory?
I think we're on neither. I think that we are still debating which way we should think about it. And while that debate is going on, stuff's happening outside of the larger debate in niche places. And certainly right now, a lot of those niche debates are suddenly prominent in the administration, but that happened fast. That was confusing. I uh, I think that the the sort of implicit conversation that the artist and writer had in Fluorescent Black is the same conversation that we're having right now in society.
You've been listening to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How it's made and how it informs our everyday culture.
Our theme music is Human Factor by Mile Marker.
And you're listening to Drive Fast by 3 Chain Links.
All show notes are available at patreon.com/supercontext.
And you can email the show at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm available on Blue Sky as @ChristianSager.
And I am not available. I have a scorched earth policy on social media. 2 N's, 2 T's.